So good morning, everyone from New York. And I know that at least one or two will join from India as well, because they just emailed me earlier today. So, I would like to briefly introduce you our Associate Dean, Dr. Emis Ivan, who will give us a welcoming few words. Emis?
Yes, first of all, Basilio, thanks for this honor and the invitation to address this particularly fantastic group. So it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you at this event. As Basilio mentioned, my name is Emis Ivan, and I'm the Senior Associate Dean of Faculty at the Collins College of Professional Studies. As you can hear, I am not a native English speaker, so I also represent international communication to some extent in myself. And it is a really great pleasure for me to be part of this event, not just as, saying a couple of words and seeing familiar faces, Mina. It's very nice to see you. But also because I do believe that, this type of events, especially under the circumstances we are living in, extremely important. And just looking in and listening to your conversation to hear that, behind the faces on the screen, these are deep friendships, understanding, maybe scholarly and academic collaboration. And if under the circumstances and under the pandemic, if we could learn something, that how important those virtual communications, virtual understanding, and doing things academically or personally, even when we are far apart, and we cannot really physically meet. I also want to say that the Institute of International Communication is really the heart of our college when it comes to research, when it comes to fostering collaboration between colleges, between interdisciplinary collaborations, and also between different universities and scholars from all around the world. So I am really honored to be part of your conversation. Welcome all of you. And, it is just, will be a fantastic talk and discussion, I am sure. So welcome to College of Professional Studies as well as Institute of International Communication.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ivan, for taking the time to join us. And you're delighted by your presence here, that you're going to stay with us for this conversation. That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I see our numbers are by now 17 of us who are joined. This is, as I said, this was by invitation only. So we wanted to have this kind of a collaborative conversation on a very important topic that Dr. Razan has developed in her book. And in a way, I found a lot of provocations in her writings, in her books, and I thought it was worth exploring. And I'm delighted that my colleague, Dr. Mina Horowitz, has always, I call her my comrade in arms, to do all this kind of, intellectual experiments, intellectual adventures. And she has been for the last couple of years with me working and brainstorming many ideas. So we formed this, especially for this occasion, this Communicative Agora. And I think that is going to stay with us. And in fact, a colleague of mine felt that I stole his idea. I said, no, he was trying to steal my idea. So I came up with this. So that's how it's going to. So may I ask Dr. Mina Horowitz to please take over?
Welcome everybody from Helsinki and from the University of Helsinki. We are delighted, of course, to partner with Basilio. Who could resist him? So when he suggested yet another great online event, of course. With me is Irina Grigor, my colleague also from Helsinki. She is a co-host and an expert in Russian media. Myself now at the moment, I am researching more sort of European and Nordic media. So we have a sort of wide expertise from Europe as well, and I see our Austrian colleagues and others as well. I am going to just moderate the conversation, so soon enough I will stop screen sharing. But as you can see, I would ask you to keep your mic off, muted, when you're not speaking. That said, whenever you have a thought and a comment while somebody else is speaking and you're muted, please use the chat. And other than that, let's keep this a very informal and explorative and interactive session. I'm delighted to host you. So if you have any concerns at any point, you can also just send me a private message on the chat as well, if there's anything that I should do differently or you want to give me advice. But we are amongst friends, and we have a very special guest, an honor. Can I call you a friend already? Razan Jadaan, intercultural communication between reality, axiom, and image. It is our honor to invite you to give us a flavor of your new book, and then the floor is for all of us to discuss that. Razan.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good morning from Dubai. I'll just share my screen with you to start. Is the screen? Can you see the screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
So firstly I thank my colleagues and friends for inviting me to this interesting and exciting conversation. I love the title of the conversation. I love the Agora idiom, especially. So this is what encouraged me and inspired me to write my notes for today. So I'll start with an introductory note about my title, which is that the book that I wrote addresses societies as humans with natural commonalities before addressing them as habitualized, traditionalized constructs. So this is one introductory point I would like us all to bear in mind while having our discussion. Another note is that I invite in my book to do together with the reader a brainstorming experience about the present conflictual intercultural communication between Orient and Occident, East, West, the Arab world, focusing on the Arab world, and the US, American, European societies. And the book invites as well to discuss the role of mass media, or to brainstorm about the role of mass media in influencing the worldwide public opinions, and approaches to brainstorm about approaches towards authentic dialogue, focusing on the term of authenticity and originality in any kind of dialogue process, approach to dialogue process. The main ideas of the book, or the whole idea of the book, is to invite us, me as writer, you as reader, and here we all as discussers, to elevate upon our cultural frames, to see the world from a kind of scannative view, to scan the world in a way or another. Another idea of the book is to awaken the highest sense of thought, which means logic and rationality, natural intelligence, building on constructive flexibility, acclimatization, and interactivity with reality. A third idea of the book is inviting societies and public opinions to break through the antagonistic interpretations of the Hegelian dialectic by creating an antithetical dialectic based on containing differences in pluralism instead of the clash of cantonized, isolated societies. If I come to the sequence of the book, how I divided the chapters of my book as Basilio and Mina presented in the announcement about the book, I start building on two theories in the theoretical part, which are the theory of symbolic interaction and the theory of constructivism, where the theory of symbolic interaction, the basis of the theory is that societies live in kind of two environments, the natural environment and the cultural environment. The natural environment is the environment that is imposed on us. We create physical tools to survive this environment, which is reality. The other environment is the symbolic one, which we create as societies by creating our symbolic tools to aestheticize and to professionalize our coexistence. Our survival abilities and tools develop continuously in something called an autopoiesis. And one of the appearances of the evolutionary appearances of this autopoiesis are mass media systems and communication technologies. They reflect, they bridge, and they influence the worldwide public opinions. This leads us to misunderstand or to understand reality as societies and public opinions. On the other hand, the other theory I'm building on is constructivism, where Professor Bauer knows it very well. We discussed it a lot years ago, which is basically, or simply said, believes that reality is one, which has different physical, material locations and different cognitive, symbolic viewpoints and perspectives. The interaction with reality leads to the creation of cultural constructs of thought and action, simply said. So this is the first part that my book builds on, which is the theoretical part. The second part, which my book focuses on, is culture and civilization between Orient and Occident, where I see that the communication between Orient and Occident, the Arab world and the West, is a fragile relationship, a fragile intercultural relationship. And the appearances of this fragile relationship are oppositional relations, dialogic minorities, being optimistic, Orientalism, globalization, and constructive approaches of Occidentalism. The third part that I focus on in this book is the challenges that face mass media between cultures, that face mass media systems between cultures, while they present and manipulate public opinions in the worldwide societies. What we see today in the role of mass media, or in the role of mass media between cultures, is chaos of relations and chaos of information. Chaos of relations, what I mean with that is asking myself, who is leading information and where are we leading information? Who is leading and where are they leading this information? Are they leading it to dialogue or to conflict? The chaos of information I summarize in the well-known around the world stereotypes, cliches, and prejudices that are happening and that are observed between societies today. the last part of the book focuses on approaches towards authentic dialogue, where I emphasize on focusing on the authenticity and the originality of dialogue, and not just saying dialogue and that's it. And this is what happens in reality, that we have dialogues around the world, but where are they leading to? What are they missing? Not achieving what an original dialogue needs, or an authentic dialogue needs. If I come to some problematics we are facing on the intercultural level of communication between the Arab world and the West, I can summarize many problematics, and one of them is the absence of intercultural logic and rationality. Where what I mean with that is that societies lost sight of their natural and instinctive intelligence, because public opinions gave the lead to mass media systems, and hence became dependent on the fast, vast, intensive, easily accessible mass media systems and technologies. Another problematic is that we have two viewpoints of reality, two viewpoints of intercultural reality. The first viewpoint is the hegemony of the powerful dominance, and the other viewpoint is the people's struggling to ensure their health and dignity around the world. Another point is the absence of authentic revitalization in the Arab world. What we have now in the Arab world is artificial cultural developments and superficial aesthetizations of our coexistence, which is leading to fictitious prosperities. Another very important point or problematic is the phenomena of terrorism. And here we can say that we have two kinds of terrorism in the intercultural communication. The first one is the radical extremist terrorism that is represented in the following points: politicizing religion, instrumentalizing belief, direction violence, fusing religion, tradition, and social rituals into confusion, and ideologizing religion as a belief to support the dominance and manipulation in societies. The dangerous thing that this situation is leading to the presence of anonymous terrorist movements with unknown sources around the world, and it's leading to misinterpretation of religion and its principles. The second kind of terrorism after the radical extremist terrorism is the right or right-wing political terrorism that is represented in the following different scopes: the scope of racism, ethnic cleansing policies, ethnocentrism and arrogance, prejudices and stereotyped perspectives, cultural imperialism, practice of violence under the cover or name of democracy at many times. Another problematic is the Western interpretation of the Hegelian dialectic into an oppositional, antagonistic relation towards the Arab world. Another point is, as I said before, the fast, continuous technological development of mass media systems that may lead to conflict or dialogue. So we have two options when using mass media and systems and technologies: the constructive one, the destructive one. One would lead to conflict, the other would lead to dialogue. So we have all options as societies to choose which direction we want. One other problematic is Orientalism and globalization, where I see that Orientalism and globalization are almost two sides of one coin. What I mean with that both are a Western production, both use the same tools of mass media communication, Both have constructive and destructive ambitions. Both work on the following levels of mutuality or misusage of the other, pluralism and authoritarianism, reality and cliched images, war and diplomacy. Then we have the problematic of informational movement. What I mean with informational movement is how the message we convey, we send and receive across by mass media, how it moves between and how it changes between mass media, reality, and public opinions. This movement of information influences the structure of the message and the originality and authenticity of the message. And here I did a kind of analogy between, to explain this point, I did an analogy between the galactic black hole and the mass communicational black hole, between communicators, reality, and cognitive imaging processes. Then I have a problematic of expression and impression around the world, which means a problematic of lingual communicational structure, which means not taking societies, public opinions, not taking the structure of lingual communication into consideration on all levels of communication and in all its kinds. And on the other hand, not taking the elements of the message into consideration. I mean, the content, what are we talking about? The meaning, what do we understand? What do we understand from the message that we are communicating, and the signs that are the symbols and the tools that carry the message. One last problematic, I think, that we are facing is mankind themselves, mankind, him, herself. I mean, a problematic of public opinions who became dependent on mass media systems regardless of their credibility. So societies gave up on their informational independence and freedom. They handed them out to governments and opinion leaders, where they reached an inertia of cognitive consumption instead of revitalizing their instinct consistency towards continuity, coexistential continuity. So after all those problematics, we can talk about some solutions where I again address societies as naturally equal, diverse, active elements of coexistence before addressing them as framed axiomatic entities. So the first solution we may approach as public opinions and societies around the world is enlightenment and knowledge against institutional and holistic analphabetism, which the thinker and famous journalist Muhammad Arakon talked about in his writings. Arab societies should approach a path of going back to the historical point where they stopped their autonomous, independent development. They shall continue their evolutionary move from there, from the historical point where they stopped their development, their own development. They should stop the importing a consumptional attitude from the West and revive with authenticity and from the inside. Another thing that societies in general should do is to leave the artificial and imitative development and prosperities, where the philosopher Fahmi Jadaan, you know Basilio, him, I talked to you about him once. He talked about this in one of his books about the problematic of artificial and imitative developments and prosperities in the Arab world, where I suggest that the Arab world should develop with authenticity from the inside, The Western world should switch from antagonistic dialectics to dialogic ones. Societies need to achieve authentic dialogue by having a strong identity, rich knowledge, building on maturity, and wise openness, achieving constructive reflections of what mass media share, and taking the best of what mass media technologies offer. Another solution for societies maybe is to seek independence from the conflictual international political systems by creating active minds. And active minds, برضو a famous thinker, Muhammad al-Jabiri talked about active minds, where he means those minds are the minds that take the action of creation and creativity in their own hands, building on their original structure of thought. We all know Edward Said, who suggests to waive destructive narratives which lead to axiomatic inflexibility. Back to al-Jabiri, he suggests for the intercultural societies to think through the mind of the other, to create new perspectives, to practice self-criticism, and to achieve mutual enrichment. This means for us to practice constructive Orientalism and constructive Occidentalism. Another solution is that I suggest by creating two models of communication. One of them is the model of, let me check, the model of intercultural concept of elevation, which means, or which I define as, or which I explain as our duty to cross the borders of cultural and intercultural limitations in this way. And in this way, we will leave cliches and prejudices. We can stop prejudices and cliches, and we can reach or achieve cultural and intercultural mutual enrichments. The other model I would like to suggest is to create a new kind of resistance against cultural inertia and intercultural clash, resisting antagonism in containing natural, interactive diversity. Another solution, which is one of the last ones, is to awaken the competency of problem solving by revitalizing natural intelligence, as I mentioned before, and by freeing the evolutionary natural spirit, by building on continuous dynamicity, interactivity with the surroundings, and constructive acclimatization, developing the love for discoveries and knowledge about reality. Finally, societies should be aware of the variables of any message they receive, send, or communicate through mass media systems. They should be aware of the communication environment, of the environment generally, and of the communicative surroundings on all levels of communication and in all its kinds. This should lead us to understand the relation between reality, axiom, and images. And after theorizing about those problematics and solutions of the intercultural conflict, and we can go more and more towards that, is the question now, the important question is what to do next? What shall we do as societies, as public opinions, as cultural and intercultural communicators around the world? What I suggest is two things, maybe, that we can start as societies to work on. To rebuild constructs of thought by pluralism and by resisting inflexibility immobility, and hindering development. And by leaving ideological systems. Another thing I would suggest, building on what we discussed in last August, Basilio and Mina and dear colleagues, is civility. The civility where I ask to develop absolutist cultural frames into open spaces. How do we do that? By dynamicizing cultural structures from intercultural illiteracy into intercultural enlightenment, and by regaining and recalling the importance of natural human commonality between societies of the world. Thank you. I hope I was limited in my 20 minutes.
A little bit more, but,
A little bit more.
we enjoyed every moment. If you stop sharing your screen, we can all see one another when we
Yes.
Thank you. I have to say, just really quickly, that we are here. I'm so excited. We are here resisting against cultural inertia. We know that communication studies is blatantly Anglo-Saxon, Western. Everything is in English, and also a lot of Latin American scholars have sort of brought up this point. And now you are forcing us in a very wonderful and intellectual way to really step up and step out and start to rethink. So please, the floor is yours. Maybe before anybody else, Basilio Montero. Basilio, you were so enthralled by Razan's book, and you wanted to get us together. Why is that? Do you want to start with a comment? You are muted.
Thank you, Mina, for putting me on the spot here. So, yes, when I first came across her book, almost six months ago, I think, and talked about it, and I found it very fascinating because, as you said in your comments just a couple of seconds ago, the world of communication has been very Anglo-Saxon driven, and it's no fault of anyone. It's just how the currents are, and historically, the Latin Americans have raised questions of dependence theory and all kinds of stuff. Now, I think when I saw Razan's book, and I said, "Oh, this is another voice coming from the Middle East." And part of the Middle East we have not paid attention to, and also not only have paid attention to, if I may use the term, the has been demonized for the longest time. Oh, bad things are happening, the bad people there are terrorists and this and that. So that, I think, is about time for us to start rethinking. And but often what has happened is, and I think Razan has pointed out in her presentation, that to make up for that, the Arab world she used the term artificial culturalization, artificial aestheticization, which I think she's onto something there, pointing out, and she's calling for authenticity. And so that's what I found very, very appealing about the whole thing. And I think it is incumbent upon us who consider ourselves as scholars in the field of communication that we have to open our eyes and cross the boundaries and kind of engage into this broader dialogue and kind of bring us some semblance of some sort of authenticity in our communication. I'm not trying to, come down hard on the Anglo-Saxon model. Yes, that's what the historical times, and so it developed. Now it is opening up our new awareness, and I think we have to be open to that new awareness.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours. Anybody comments, questions at this point?
I do have a question.
Yes,
so what I really enjoyed reading the synopsis on the book and seeing the presentation really tied it all together. The part that really spoke to me was the very end when you talked about that cultural immersion and needing to expand our horizons. I'm really trying to do that in my course lectures with my students. I am on a campus that is not as diverse as our main university's campus. So I feel as though a lot of the students are coming in with thinking that has been taught by their parents, and that's really kind of what they're locking into. So this is really the first time that they are being challenged to think differently than how they have been raised. And the challenge that I'm giving them in my courses is to do just what you said, really expand your belief system and learn how to suspend your belief of reality to understand and be able to perceive somebody else's, depending on their cultural perspectives and way of life. But I'm running into sort of a wall because I don't have a lot of examples for them in terms of the Middle East. And I was wondering if maybe you can shed some light on pointing me in the direction of some really great resources that maybe you used in your book that I can then translate to my communication courses to help do that.
Yes, of course, of course. I'll check my literature lists, and there are very nice. I'm sure you have them, and I'm sure most of them are in Western languages like German and English language, and they are very helpful to take as a base to then go to the practical world and try to see or to observe or analyze what is happening between the Arab world and the West. But of course, I'll check my list and I will send you the best literature that is useful for this path. Of course, sure.
Thank you
But
so much.
check, send me your email or
Okay.
share. You can share it on the chat, and I can.
Okay.
Or to Mina, send it to Mina, and Mina will
Send
share
it
with me.
to all of, or maybe Basilio, and we'll reach out to everybody who signed up for this talk.
Yes.
Great, Nancy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Great
Thank you.
comment also, because I happen to know that Razan and Professor Bauer, Professor Monteiro, they've been also talking about this educational aspect quite a bit. So you, Nancy, you just tapped into that. I'm just thinking, and I invite everybody to comment on this. You made me think how complicated and challenging our media systems are, and including communication technology, but how very simplistic our ideas and representations and discourses and arguments are nowadays. Isn't there like this sort of a, and what really meant a lot to me was that you are starting to give us tools how to really expand on that. And there's an interesting sort of disconnect between all and everything, and then and complexity, and then this incredible black and white simplicity, if you like. So my 2 cents. Anybody else would like to comment?
I would. I thought it was interesting how when we're talking about media systems and we're talking about the antagonistic approach that is taken, sorry, I'm watching my niece and have Cocomelon on in the background. And then, but also which made me think of one of the traditional news values of the West, which is conflict. And so if our stories and our mass media systems are built upon this idea of presenting conflict, how then do we challenge this antagonistic approach and come to more of a dialogic approach, as the presentation suggested? I think that speaks to just how we train our journalists, how we consume our news, and possibly our consumption habits of entertainment and media in general. So it's an interesting thought, challenging a traditional way of reporting and communicating.
Thank you. Razan?
Yeah, it's actually a very complicated relation. And I know I lived in the West for a long time. Professor Bauer knows that. And I was always exposed to lots of questions and lots of challenges trying to explain where I come from, and that this world where I come from is not just as what we hear in mass media or what the newspapers say or what they define about the Arab world or the Muslim world or those societies. So as a student, I already had this challenge in leading lots of interesting discussions, and sometimes even with best friends. Like we had sometimes the clashes when it's not because we want to fight, no, but it's because I understand, because we are like we were raised as Nancy said, we were raised in specific environments and somehow closed constructs, yeah. So we got used to, and we thought this is the only way to live and this is the only reality we should believe in. But being exposed to other cultures, being exposed to other languages, I understood more and more, that there is much more to know about societies in societies. But of course, not everybody has the chance to travel, to live with other people, to experience, to have individual experiences. So we have to work on mass media systems. And what I was talking about is the natural intelligence that we have. We have the abilities. We have, as humans, we have all the abilities within us. We have the natural intelligence, the instinctive intelligence. We have, we can do that. We can open our minds. We have logic. We have rationalities. We have the all over history, the philosophies of ethics, I mean, and human and constructive human communication. The question is, why aren't we using that as societies? That what we already have is that we have to use it. We have to flexibilize the brains. We have to work, and this is why I kind of criticize societies becoming dependent on mass media systems in a way that they forgot about their own independence and their own abilities to be their own sources of communication, especially now with the vast development of mass media communication technologies. We have the technologies that we can use or make use of in a constructive, positive way. So, of course, this needs lots of work. This needs lots of cooperation, and not just cultural, but intercultural one. I mean, we should work together all around the world to create this base of constructive intercultural communication between the West and the Arab world, or all the cultures that we may observe as conflictual in having their relationships around the world.
Thank you. I have a couple of people eager to comment and question. Remzi's next, and then Mark. Remzi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mina. I forgot this reaction part that you can raise the hand. You usually are used to through this online communication that students raise their hands, but we as teachers, we do not use that. So there are two comments I would like to make, and one is a story that I would like to share with all of you. There is a former Minister of Education from Austria, which Professor Bauer knows him very well, Erhard Busek. He usually told the story of when the ministers of education were gathering together, they were telling jokes in English. And he told us once, he said, only the British minister and the Irish minister, they never laughed. And we said, okay, guys, can you tell us why it is so? Because we are having a lot of fun and so on. And they were saying, oh, because we don't understand your jokes. I think this is the best way to explain the intercultural communication and education as such. And I think this pandemic time has shown us the need of changing our way of communication and changing the way how we educate the generations. Not even not even in the sphere of journalism, but I think in general. I agree a lot with Razan, what Razan said, and I think this is going to be a wonderful book. Razan, I hope you're writing it in English and it's not in Arabic, otherwise we will not be able to read it. And I would like to ask you if you have actually dealt with a theory of communicology from Willem Flusser, because you talked about the dialogue, and have you discussed it through his perspective? Because he argues that dialogue should be seen also as codes and not only as the way of communication. But also from this discourse and codes perspective. So this is much from me for the time being, and maybe later on we will have time for some next questions. Thank you.
Yes, Ramzi, about Willem Flusser, yes, I wrote about him in my book as well. And the point that I focused on in the book was comparing between discourse and dialogue, and how he explains both aspects of communication and the models he used for discourse and dialogue. And I tried to come to a result communicating between or trying to relate between the discourse on the cultural level of societies, and between creating or achieving dialogue on the wider level or wider range between cultures, which I call intercultural communication. So yes, thank you so much for mentioning him. And yes, I talked about him in the dialogue part of the book. It was really helpful and interesting to use his thoughts. And the educational system, one point to that, I mentioned that as well, where I tried to call or invite to create or to develop the educational systems, yes, in the Arab world as well as in the Western world. That we need to work on the pedagogical aspect of our educational systems, because otherwise I don't think it would work. It's a very important base to work on the education of our young generations to be able to deal with the new era of communication, of course building on the past and developing it to a positive or more constructive way of communication.
Thank you. I have Professor Mark, Professor Thomas, and Professor Elizabeth in this order. Mark, the floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me? First question. Okay, great. So I love the talk. I worked for many years in the Arab world. I was a teacher in Saudi Arabia, and in Kuwait, and I worked in Abu Dhabi and in Doha. And one of the things I really like this discussion on symbolic acts and symbolic interactions. And what I felt, there were 2 points I wanted to make. The first was that I do feel that there is an overemphasis. I like your phrase very much of artificial aesthetic or an imported aesthetic. I feel that there is a overemphasis in the countries that are not democratic, in the acquisition of Western brands as a way of presenting a Western thought. So for example, I was critical of Cornell being paid, I think, almost $1 billion for branding rights, for having a university name in, I think it was in Abu Dhabi. I'm not sure if it was in Abu Dhabi or in Doha. Or for example, there's NYU Doha, there's the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, I think, or Qatar, I think. I've been very critical of this importation of Western brand names, really at the expense of focusing on what is present and local. The other thing I wanted to say was that I also felt that there was a gap between the symbolic act of democracy and the processes that are fundamentally democratic but are sort of hidden. So there has been sort of an overfocus on like the election or the event, but not on the process behind it. I was part of a team that investigated a couple of years ago the failure of the Egyptian Arab revolt from a very unique perspective. And that perspective was on the process of constitution writing. And
where is he? What happened?
I think he froze. I believe he's on mobile.
I see.
there we go.
Yes.
There I'm back. Sorry.
Oh, now
Oh,
you're
he's
back.
back.
Okay,
He's back.
continue,
Yeah.
Mark.
My apologies. So my apologies. That was not my fault. That's totally the fault of my internet carrier. So anyway, I was part of a team, and we were investigating the basically the failure of the Egyptian Arab Spring from a very odd perspective, and that perspective was the process of constitution writing. So we looked at not who was the players and who was elected, what happened to Sisi, etc. We looked at the actual process, and the process comparison was very interesting. So the Egyptian constitution that was written after the revolt took 3 months. It was assembled as it was written by a group of 100 people who were chosen based along ethnic and religious lines in Egypt. And after 3 months, they produced a 800-page constitution. I mean, like literally 800 pages, a lot of which was copied and pasted from the prior constitution. And that constitution ultimately resulted in the failure that we know what happened afterwards. By comparison, we looked at, and it's not to say it's good or bad, but really at the process. The US Constitution was 4 pages long, and it took almost 1.5 years to ratify. And we felt that there was a critical lack of discussion in media about the underlying processes of democratization, and that a key part of the persistence of dignity in any group was the acknowledgement of process complexity, and that was a critical factor in accelerating communication efficacy at the intercultural level. So that's, I mean, for me, it was a very, very eye-opening experience to really understand how you could examine process level aspects of intercultural communication and basically democratic constitution building. So I was very excited to do it. I'm really happy to hear the things you have to say about that as well.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for your notes, and they are very, very essential and very important, not just for the Western listener or reader, but for the Arabic public opinions. This is actually what you just mentioned, and not just in constitution writing. It is a crisis. It is a crisis in the whole Arab world. That what I talked about and what you mentioned as well, what you commented on the artificial risings and the superficial aestheticizations and professionalizations of our development and coexistence. So yani, our societies are like on the surface, lots of, especially I live in the Gulf area, but I have to say that especially in the Gulf area, you see, as you experience, like very developed appearances. But what about, I mean, the base? This is the question. What's happening under the surface? Yeah. What does the world know about that, or does the world want to know about that? Maybe the foreign policies don't want to know about it. What I observe, the Western policies, maybe they know, but they don't want to act towards it. Because I feel what I wrote, one of my notes was, but I was afraid to talk too much. One of my notes was that we still live in an after colonialized era. We still live in the under the remnants of colonialist ideologies, where the West is still here, but not. You know, it's unclear what is the role of the West in those societies, because they say they are becoming democratic, beautiful, but the name is there, yes, but what is happening under the name? One of the examples you mentioned in Egypt and in the whole Arab region, you can see we can observe examples in the different cultural aspects, social, religion, economy, politics, in all our cultural aspects. We can see this kind of like artificial developments. We have names, yes. We have brands, yes. As a visitor, you become fascinated with what is happening in the Arab world, but going a bit digging, without digging even, a bit deeper under the surface, everything will show up. The problematics that I mentioned before will appear to you, and then we and you and everybody will stand there and will not know where to start in order to finish or to achieve or to stop. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Professor Thomas.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, nice to see you all. Thank you very much, Razan. It's nice to know that you are going on in this topic, as we have been discussing for a long time when you have been studying here. I have three, let me say, challenging questions related to the theoretical concept. When we talk about culture, I often have the feeling we are talking about a territory. This is my territory and the Arabic territory and another territory, so as we would possess it. But I think culture is nothing which we possess. It's something we refer to in order to have in order to have a meaning, or in order to have even a control of what you're thinking and what you're doing and how you behave and so on. And if maybe, I think if you would point out more this concept, you would not talk about intercultural communication, but transcultural communication, saying that I would understand you have said that as well. I would understand my own cultural reference better by understanding the reference of other people with other cultural frames, yeah, for behaving and thinking and so on. This is the one question. The second one is you have been talking about globalization and if I remember correct, Occidentalism, you say this is somehow two sides of one coin. And if I understood right, you say this is a Western concept. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I think it's really interesting to bring those two concepts, globalization and transcultural communication, somehow together, because the one needs the other and the one nourishes the other. And the third question is more a feeling. I always have the feeling intercultural communication or transcultural communication, we are always using somehow as a normative concept, saying we should understand each other because of different cultures, not only as we have, but because of different cultures. So this is somehow an affirmative concept. I would feel better. Let me say it like that. I would feel better if we would have an emancipative theory, saying having a culture or living a culture gives you inspiration, gives you hope, gives you freedom, gives you liberation, whatever. Becoming yourself by culture. So this is maybe then a new perspective to understand the value of intercultural communication. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Bauer, you got me in this.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'll start with the easier question, which is globalization, Orientalism, and Occidentalism.
Yeah.
Where I try to observe or to see that globalization and Orientalism are two sides of one coin. How do you say? My result from this thought was, it started. Orientalism started first, where the West was going towards the Arab world or the Muslim world. For research, for colonizing, for imperializing, for knowing, for knowledge, and so on. So it started in this way, that the West tried to go east to discover, to live the instinct of knowledge and this constant instinct, constant knowledge and discoveries to keep the coexistence going, their existence and coexistence going. So where I say Orientalism is in that way and a Western production. When we come to globalization, to the phenomena of globalization, I mean, in this part of the world, it was like a received idiom term, or how do you say, practice, yeah. So it came, the West again came to globalize, came to globalize in different scopes of diplomacy or dialogue, under different names of diplomacy and dialogue and knowledge and economy and so on. So what I say is that Orientalism developed to what is called globalization, and where they both have like somehow the same tools, the same goals, but in a developed, different, evolutionized way. Whereas Occidentalism, I suggest a kind of Occidentalism, the same way how Orientalism started in the West and developed to globalization in their constructive and destructive aspects. I called in my book for a kind of Occidentalism in the Arab world or the East or the Orient should start a kind of Occidentalism, like going towards the West, trying to know the West, trying to communicate with the West, trying to have a kind of constructive, hopefully, coexistence with the West. So in this way, I switched. I switched the aim to have a kind of mutual, maybe hopefully equal way of communication by having a kind of Orientalism and a kind of Occidentalism to balance the communication between the two worlds. Yes, the other question about the difference, and I will relate it to the first questions by saying culture, by describing culture as a territory. Yes, for me, I see when I observe cultures, I see that they describe themselves as a territory. Every culture or every society possesses this attitude, this attribute, those attributes on the different aspects, in the different aspects of living, daily life, and interactivity. But what I called for in this book is exactly that we should there should be an emancipatory way of dealing with culture. It is not mine, it is not yours, and in the end of the day, we exist on what we forget as humans before being societies. As I said in my introductory note, that we should think of ourselves before thinking about ourselves as framed, culturalized, habitualized constructs, cultural constructs. Before that, we are humans. We have common natures that we forgot about. We have common natural backgrounds that we can build on or start from to see ourselves and the other in a kind of emancipatory way, which means that nothing belongs to me, nothing belongs to you as person, but we should have a pluralistic way of coexisting together. Yeah, and for about intercultural and transcultural communication, it was for me like a very hectic how do you say, experience to say, okay, in Arabic, how can we define the idioms of culture, interculture, and transculture? Yeah, so it was a bit of a stressful way of finding the right meaning of or usage of the meaning to give the reader the right attention to the word I want to use. Yeah. So you are right. It is kind of both, but used in different positions, depending on what you want to say, what I want to say, or how I want to use, analyzing the idea and using it in the practical way of interaction. So yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Oh, big questions, a lot of food for thought. We could probably analyze those questions for a couple of hours, but Elizabeth, you've been so kind and patient. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Jadaan, for this really wonderful talk. It really lit up so many light bulbs in my head, and I have, you know, a comment / question about journalism. And in the abstract that you sent, you say that you know, media of course shapes public opinion, and I would argue that journalists, more than any other, you know, mass communicators, are also able to build, yeah, bridges of understanding between cultures. So my question is really, since I don't know too much about the region, but my question is, you know, how can journalists from the West and also, you know, from, as you say, the Orient, how can they frame coverage about each other that is not, yeah, antagonistic, that actually promotes maybe common values or values that seem desirable? You know, I'm thinking about maybe pro-democracy frames, or, you know, freedom of expression, pluralism. When I you know, listen to your talk, really the big buzzword that comes to my mind is just tolerance. You know, how can we practice tolerance, and how can we move, and this is really my question, how can we move this dialogue from this elite dialogue that you also describe, and, you know, Mark mentioned, to really mass public opinion? You know, do we, or is there a way that journalists can help to yeah, communicate to mass publics that tolerance is a good thing, is a desirable thing, and then how could we achieve that? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You know, it's journalists are the key, in my opinion. I mean, because journalists are the ones who research. Journalists are the ones who live events and who meet people face to face from all around the world. So I feel that journalists are playing, or should play. Professor Bawa doesn't like the word should, but they are already playing, journalists are already playing their role in communicating the globe, But now we have lots of challenges, of course, on this level, because we have different ranges of freedom of speech. This is one important problem. So in the Arab world, the freedom of speech has its limitations, as we all know. It's difficult to be free to express or to say things, or to address things in a free democratic way, let's say. On the other hand, the Western journalists, they have their freedoms, but maybe they don't have the access, enough access to the other world, because of lots of barriers, maybe cultural barriers, maybe lingual barriers, maybe, of course, cultural beliefs, or cultural how do you say, cultural I forgot the word.
Prejudice.
Maybe not just the prejudice, the
predisposition,
the limited frame that maybe the journalists live in, as well as in the Arab world, as well as in the Western world. They have their limitations on the political level. This is one, as I told you, freedom of speech. On the financial level, as you know, the source decides what you can say or not. The source of investment of the money giver. The social system, of course, decides or limits someone within the framework that they believe, that the culture believes in, or the society believes in. The journalist is not allowed to say or to use specific ideas or express specific ideas or say more than it is wanted from the social aspect, from the social perspective, or the social limitation, the political limitation, the economical limitation. So I think the journalists, they have their limitations, but they still should find the way, or not should find the way. It's not their fault, I should say, but here we go back to the idea of education again. If the governments agree, and the power holders, the dominance holders in societies agree or decide that authentic dialogue or freedom of speech is our goal, believe me, they will work on it. Within a few years, it will be all a solved problem. You know what I mean? So I think it's journalists are the key, and the policies around them on the local level and on the international level, on the national and on the international level, are the ones who limit journalists from the freedom of speech and from interacting on the global level in a constructive way. And if the policies change their mind, as I feel happened in the 90s at some point, where dialogue became a kind of trend, let's say, as Mark said before, they worked on it, and people started really to interact with the idea. And then things changed, and I don't know, policies changed, international politics around the world changed, and it fell back, the communication fell back into ideologies and extremisms and radicalisms, and now we see the right wings with the racist appearances around the world, which we thought had an end already, and should be an old solved question all over history. But it came back. But it's not the fault of the journalists. It's not the fault of societies. It's, I think, the limitations the world lives in. But still, as I said before, we have all the capabilities as societies, as individuals, as especially with the technological development nowadays, we have the capabilities to do a change in any way and in every aspect. I'm optimistic.
You addressed this already a little bit, but Mohit from the Malavia Center for Peace Research in India, researcher there, actually used a concrete example of right-wing terrorism, and how can that be diluted by using mass media when the institutions themselves have been ruined, and they are protecting actually the right-wing governments. So where do we get that goodwill to do just what you've just proposed?
I mean, we have to start somewhere. Yani it's I know now it's we live in tough times, and especially in the Corona times, it limited us. I mean, we were limited in our homes for months in the past years, no, in the past year and a half. So there was no possibility to have face-to-face communications, to teach face-to-face at schools and universities, which is a different story than being online. I mean, it is a way to communicate and not to be isolated, yes, and it helped a lot this year. But we are going through, let's say, conflictual times or stressful times and limiting times, though the past year and this year. But as I said, yes, the policies, the political institutions in the different countries are the ones who limit the people, yes. And being afraid doesn't help as individual, doesn't help us develop in the right way, because we don't have what is the most important, especially in journalism and in normal life, freedom of speech. This is what we lack here in the Arab world, and where the West lacks it but in another way, in different kinds of so-called democracies. So it is a worldwide crisis, let's say. And I call it crisis because a crisis is a phenomena that has solutions. It's not that we have a problem and we stop there. No, we should really continue, and we should hope that policies change around the world. And I mean, the best example is the USA. I mean, the USA, the policies change very fast. I mean, every 4 years, 8 years, you have a different president, and every president had his or her role in a different way, influencing the society. And there is hope. And the nice thing about the world is that we live in an evolutionary kind of existence. If evolution stops, we are how do you say, we extinct, the world is done. So the optimistic thing about this crisis we are going through is that we are evolutionary. Our existence is evolutionary, and it is able to develop in different ways and in different paths. And okay, if we live a crisis today, this doesn't mean that it will last. I mean, Donald Trump was president for a few years, and his presidency stopped, and now we have a new president, and hopefully it will be a different way of communication in the USA. And we have here, of course, in our artificial developments, presidents change or presidents stay for 40 years. It's a different way of development, but there is change, there is constant change, and this is our hope. As long as there is change, as long as there is movement, informational and relational movement within societies and between them, I mean, there is always hope and optimism for constructivity and positiveness. This is for sure. So as long as we are not stopping, there is no problem with us. We're developing.
You make me think of a colleague of mine in an unnamed small European country who, in a country that has turned from relative freedom of expression to quite illiberal, if not authoritarian, and he's been one of the targeted by the politicians. And he said, people have to relearn and relearn and relearn to be together. That it seems that when we get too complacent and somehow careless and not ready to learn, comes this crisis, and then we have to relearn again that we have to get along. We have a very good question from Tanya about the role of social media and how social media perception, social media has changed our perceptions of the world. And is it dialogue, a quasi-dialogue only, or is it a real opportunity?
I would say social media is the opportunity at some point, because I feel there is so much to communicate on social media, whatever the content is, but there is so much to communicate, and there are so many sources to give your information to, it's amazing. It is, I mean, it's impressive. Yeah. Now the question is, who is using mass media, social media, and how can we make a constructive use out of those whole structures that are so fastly, I mean, so strong tools where you can communicate information as fastest as possible and as intensive as possible. I mean, it's impressive. But the new generation, as we see, are the ones who are conquering the social media, and they're very interesting and very fun. But of course, this reflects what kind of generations are being raised nowadays. So, so this should be our focus, yani emancipatory, Professor Bawa, focus on the new coming up generations. Those are the ones who we should like educate or give the chance to know how to communicate constructively and from a dialogic perspective. It's an amazing technology, and I hope that we will be able to use it in a positive, constructive way.
Go ahead, Basilia. For some reason, we can't hear you. You are not muted, but maybe something is going on with your computer.
Nothing.
It's probably the internet connection, I think.
Let's see. Do you want to add it on chat? You can add it on chat. Yeah. Remzi, I see you have a comment.
Yeah, if I may, if we are not running out of time. Thank you. Razan, you mentioned two points that I would like to have a discussion on it. You said that journalists should not be afraid, and they should raise their voices, and people should not be afraid if they want to have the freedom of speech and extend their views. But I would like, although that doesn't belong to the part of the world where you live or maybe you're focused on, but I would like to discuss here, what do you think of the case of Khashoggi, and how would you explain that, even in relation to the social media power, and like to his connection and to the Turkey's involvement in this case? How would you argue in that case, like why it happened? How could we prevent such events in the future? And how can we help people who suffer under regimes? And how can we help those parts of the world when people are not able to speak their, to speak freely?
Yes, you came to a very important issue, which is shocked actually the Arab world and the world itself, with its east and its west and everywhere. And as you know, in this part of the world, we were not allowed to discuss this issue or whatever happened about this incident. Although I tell you that it was a great shock for journalists and for individuals and for all the whole public opinions and societies. Although we were not able to write or express our opinions about it, but the discussions undercover, the discussions between the people, in the families, between friends, colleagues, wherever it was possible and whenever it was possible, were the impression that everybody was shocked, I have to say. And of course, journalists, as I said, are the key to the world, but they are, of course, facing everywhere the challenge of staying alive if they want to express their opinions or reflect the public opinions freely, in a free way. And as you heard, there was another incident in Jordan as well, with the king, with the royal family and the prince and so on. And there it was not allowed to talk about it as well, not on the journalistic level as well as on the social level. So it is a very conflictful, especially in our part of the world, and I feel in the West nowadays as well. It is a very conflictful situation with the journalists, and of course nobody wants to lose his or her life. I mean, why should I lose my life because I want to do my job? Yeah, or if I want to reflect the society's opinion or as mirror for the societies, as the theories of journalism and communication say around the world. And what we learn, and this is what we learn at universities and at journalistic schools. But what we see in reality, of course, is a different story. And journalists' lives are in danger everywhere. And I would say no, journalists as humans, as people, as a part of society, should take care of themselves and should not throw themselves in hell because they know what the consequences are if they say this opinion or that. Of course, this is not their job, and they are not journalists to do that and to die after that. So, as I said, journalists are part of the system, are part of the cultural and intercultural and global system, which should be taken care of from their communities, and who should not, if the system who should be intelligent enough to deal with the system, to use the right messages within the system they live in. So if we live in this part of the world, where I am now, journalists should be intelligent enough, yes, to communicate the public opinion's message, the society's message, but in a way the society understands it within the culture, within the culture that is built in the constructs of thought of those societies. Yeah, if I live in the West, I know I can use terms, expressions, and reflect society in a different way, which is the democratic Western way, and I will do that as a journalist. So journalists should be educators as well, and should be forebuild, should be the role models of their societies. And nobody should educate kids and generations to be a kamikaze, informational kamikaze somehow. No, it's not the solution. I mean, journalists are educators, and they should help and play their role in building the society within the structure public opinions do understand and could relate to, to achieve as much positive, constructive solutions as we can. Yeah, but of course, journalists have a challenging and dangerous life nowadays all around the globe.
Yeah, and also reflecting to Tanya's point about social media, there's also the huge, I think, mental health issue because of all the hate that they receive through social media. So the physical challenges, physical violence against them, and the threats, but also the sort of virtual threats, which is actually keeping, I think, globally young people from studying journalism, believe that, or leaving. I think Dr. Monteiro is back back in business. The last question for you.
Thank you very much, Mina. This is a kind of comes up from Professor Bauer's comments about transcultural dimensions of it. And I would like to make a little distinction between space and place. So I think, especially now, I think it's becoming much more relevant to make that distinction, because when we talk maybe of transcultural dimensions, we're talking about more about the space rather than the place, physicality of it. So, but also I want to point out that in the last 30 years or so, the globalization project has homogenized, or at least tried to homogenize culture. But culture has become commodity, and commodity is now being monetized. So culture is being monetized. And that's where I think our Razan's book kind of presents a challenge to us to start rethinking about these things. You know, how much can we go on monetizing our culture? And if we are going to monetize the culture, culture becomes commodity and therefore can be monetized. And so, for example, now in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, for example, a little bit that I know, they are kind of opening up to the tourists. Tourists is a vehicle of monetization because they want to show what it is and see the culture. But there is kind of try to, what Razan was saying, try to aestheticized artificial culturalization taking place. And in a way, it says, okay, here it is, come and visit us. And the world is feeling comfortable in that artificial culturalization taking place. And so, again, it's a vehicle of monetization of culture. And that's where I think lies our big challenge today as well, you know, along with what you talked about, the journalism. Now, I want to take this opportunity to say a word of thank you so much for all of us. All good things have to come to an end. And very, very special thanks, Razan, for getting us to think about this issue that a few months ago, we have not paid attention to it, you know, spoken about it this vibrantly as we did this morning. And thanks to your book and thanks to your ongoing conversation with us, which has kind of expanded our own way of thinking. And I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful to all of us, all of the colleagues, 24 of our colleagues who are joined here from different parts of the world, from India, from Germany, from the Middle East, and from New York as well, and my own colleagues from St. John's University for joining us. And from Kosovo as well, we have. So I have to recognize that, Ramsey. And so, and from Austria, my colleague Thomas Bau. And so I'm very, very grateful for this wonderful conversation. And a super special thanks to my colleague and friend, Mina Aslama Horowitz, for always shepherding these conversations in a very kind of intellectually stimulating way. Thank you so much, Mina. And thanks in a very special way also to Irina Grigor for also joining us and supporting us through University of Helsinki. So grateful to the University of Helsinki for joining us in this very interesting collaboration. And I'm sure we'll have many more collaborations coming as time passes by. And Razan, you're not done. We'll be inviting you again for further conversations because you kept us provoking. So be prepared. All right. So, okay. All right. So wonderful to everyone. Stay safe. Good evening, good night, good afternoon to everyone. And from here, greetings from New York.